Back. StacyOnTheRight.com. Thank you for your ears tonight. All right, we have Kenneth Schrupp, strategist at Chamberlain PR and editor-in-chief of the California Review at Kenneth Schrupp on Twitter. Hey, thanks so much, Kenneth, for coming on.
Thanks, Stacy, for having me.
All right, so let's unpack this. We have your latest article in the Federalist. The Inflation Reduction Act is nothing more than a handout to Big Pharma. What's the connection to Big Pharma here?
Well, as many of your viewers may or not be aware, Democrats' largest owners, some of them are actually the pharmaceutical companies that they've been trying to control with the Inflation Reduction Act.
So they're wanting to control what specifically? Because I love that the Democrat Party's largest donors are from the pharmaceutical industry, but most Americans don't really pay attention to that.
Right. So in recent decades, prescription drug prices have been going up at a rate higher than inflation. And to counteract this, Democrats have been hoping to pass legislation to bring drug prices under control. They believe they've done this with the Inflation Reduction Act. However, it's not clear that these measures will actually reduce the cost of drugs at all, and instead are just going to enrich pharmaceutical companies. There's three ways in which they attempt to do this. The first is by, quote-unquote, allowing negotiation for drugs, for the top 10 big spending drugs each year, starting in 2026. Unfortunately, these negotiations aren't really negotiations in the colloquial sense. They're really just saying, look, you accept the price offered by Medicare, and if you don't accept by the end of 2 years, we'll tax you at 65 to 95% of your income on that drug. And it really sounds like a gun to a company's head. So assuming a company's drug is going to be negotiated after 7 to 11 years, they're probably going to want to raise prices as much as they can while they still can, which is also why this Inflation Reduction Act includes a measure to cap increases in drug prices to the rate of inflation. For those of you guys who know out there, inflation has been about 14.5% over the past 2 years. Over the same time period, drug prices actually have slowed down significantly in growth and have been only at 2.5% growth over the past 2 years total combined. So by requiring that these drugs be negotiated after 7 to 11 years, what we can expect is that companies are going to raise their prices by the maximum every year because they know that they're going to be given a price that they have to give to the government or get all of their profits lost from that drug.
So you can't describe a worse plan for Americans during coming out of the pandemic. I mean, it seems as if this was intentionally created to exacerbate problems that Americans are trying to solve.
Well, I think there's two levels to why Democrats are doing this. It's extremely popular with the base. These policy prescriptions have been running around the Beltway for a decade now. So staffers have been hearing about this for a decade. They think it's actually going to help people, but we know that's not going to be true. I didn't even get to the worst part of this policy, which is how they're just going to pass the buck to American taxpayers, so it doesn't matter how prices get because Americans aren't directly going to pay them. The Inflation Reduction Act included a measure to cap out-of-pocket prescription drug costs for Medicare beneficiaries at $2,000 per year. All this does is encourage companies to raise prices as high as they can because the average person on Medicare's drug costs, someone who's retired, someone who's older, is already $6,000 per drug, and the average person is on 5 to 7 drugs. So that's a cost of up to about $33,000 a year, most of which the taxpayers are picking up. If you have a total cap at $2,000, doctors will prescribe whatever they want. People are going to take more drugs than they probably would otherwise because it's no extra cost to them. So we're just going to give more pills to Americans while pharmaceutical companies get rich and Democrats can say that they've done something for the American people.
So wait a second, Kenneth, because I want to make sure that we're getting, this is a lot of information. It's coming at us fast. So the average American who's receiving Medicare is on 6 separate medications.
So seniors overall, the data isn't exactly clear for Medicare specifically, but seniors in America take an average of 5 drugs, 7 for those who are in nursing homes. And those ones each cost an average of $6,604 each. So you multiply that by 5, you get to $33,000 a year.
Wow. Wow. Okay. So we're talking about people who are already under, I mean, it seems like you might be under some heavy medical care if you're taking 6 or 7 drugs, every single day. And then those individuals are already having the entirety of their bill. Basically, that's all footed by the taxpayers anyway. So this is like a problem or an answer seeking a problem, is it not? Because they just want to have what they call legislative wins. It doesn't matter if they're actually doing anything.
No, it doesn't. It's entirely about optics in this scenario. And I'm very afraid that this is going to lead to even higher rates of medication for the American population, which is, as you know, the most drugged population in the world.
But also the most obese and also the least healthy. I mean, we've got a long way to go in these areas. And so this is a continuation of what we saw in the pandemic, Kenneth, when instead of leaving gyms open, they closed gyms and left casinos open. They didn't do the things that you would think during a pandemic we want to keep people sane. They did everything the opposite, and now they're continuing that with this drug program.
Exactly. This is a long-running problem in America where we believe that a certain pill or buying a certain product is going to really save our life and make us healthy and happy and fit. But fundamentally, it comes down to, are you active? Do you have a community? Do you see people? And more prescription drugs simply isn't the answer.
So what should they do? Because I know a lot of times I get a criticism when someone comes on like yourself, an expert, talks about the problem. What is the actual solution to the issue that Americans are facing with prescription drug prices?
Well, there's really 2 great ways to go about it. The first would probably be mandating price transparency on drugs. So you get to know how much the drug is actually being sold for, so that you know what you're paying, what you're actually paying for. Because right now we have this very opaque system where drug makers sell the drug to these pharmacy benefit managers who then sell the drug to the insurance companies. There will be some crazy the drug maker isn't the one who makes the vast majority of the money in this deal, because they sell it to these pharmacy benefit managers, who then can, on paper, increase the price of the drug to an absurd level and then give rebates to the insurer for buying that drug. Meanwhile, the person on the ground, the consumer, me or you, sees the price that the pharmacy benefit manager pays, and we pay our copays based on that. So we're paying a fake price for all of our drugs. If instead we knew what the real cost of these drugs were, and we didn't have these kickbacks going between the pharmacy benefit managers and the insurance companies, we would have much lower prices across the board. The second option, which is actually shockingly enough from my Governor Gavin Newsom of California, is to contract out the production of generic drugs for public healthcare system users. California has announced plans to spend a few $100 million contracting out the production of drugs within the United States for the people of California. This insulin is only going to be $35 a vial compared to, I don't know, the $500 that insurance companies charge or pay. And it's going to reduce the supply line, bring back American jobs, and bring back American production. Most of these generic drugs are made in places like India or China.
So the idea that we are going to get help from the government is pretty thin.
Right. Well, we know government involvement only causes the price of anything that they get involved in to go up, right? If you remember, in 2010, Democrats passed the Affordable Care Act, which they said would make health care more affordable. And the first ACA plans came out in 2014, and they were just $276 a person adjusted for inflation. Today, the average Affordable Care Act premium is $585 per person per month. However, the average subsidy is $505 per month. So people are only paying about 15% of their premium because they put in these price caps that let people spend as much as they want. The out-of-pocket price caps, pardon me.
Well, I'm interested in seeing what the American people can do without government being in charge and kind of forcing this issue. You're editor-in-chief of the California Review. I don't want you to leave the show tonight before you have a chance to talk to us about the California Review and give people an opportunity to read what goes on there. I have the website. It's calrev.org, calrev.org.
That is correct. The California Review is an independent journal. We hire reporters from all across California and the country to try to cover in-depth, in-state issues that matter not just to Republicans, but to all Californians from a more balanced perspective. So
I'm on the website, and you have this story that this drove me a little nutty. 608 California-funded apartments were built for over $1 million each. Those have to be some really great apartments.
Well, public housing in California has never been especially efficient or safe, but this one really takes the cake. In California, we keep passing these billion-dollar bills to build housing for homeless people or for people of lower income, and somehow we can't figure out how to build them for less than it costs to buy a brand new 2-bed, 2-bath apartment in Beverly Hills or Hollywood.
So, I mean, usually public housing projects, obviously it always costs money to build new construction, but the idea that it would be $1 million each, even in California, that seems extremely steep.
Right. The median cost of a house in California is $760,000. It certainly cannot cost more to build a public housing for the disabled and the homeless than it is to buy a house, a full house for yourself. There's something wrong here. Part of it is that they're building on very expensive land. They're deciding to build these projects in places like Santa Monica and Beverly Hills and the west side of Los Angeles, which is a very expensive area to purchase and build in. There's probably a lot of money going to contractors that are associated with politicians. We don't know how much corruption there really is. All we do know is that in California, we have a long history of county supervisors and city council members going to jail for corruption charges related to the development of housing units.
So let's kind of, first of all, what would be the good reason to put public housing in an area as expensive as Santa Monica? I mean, if you're looking around and you're like, hey, we got to put up some public housing, why choose that area?
So there's a few reasons for that are given. The first is that if you don't have any housing for your teachers, any housing for the people who provide your basic public services, that they're going to have to live very far away, the commutes are going to be long, contributes to filling up of the roads and traffic. People should live in the community that they're part of. They have some good ideas for this, but in practice, building market rate housing, of course, would be the best idea.
Right, so market rate housing that teachers could afford to buy, right? Or am I just way off on this? It's just ridiculous.
Well, I mean, the cost of a 2-bedroom apartment in Santa Monica right now to buy is something like $800,000. It's a very high number. But what classical economics teaches us, and what has been proven, is that when you build rent-controlled units, you're taking away supply from the market, which drives up rent prices for everybody who isn't able to get one of those rent-controlled units. Well, you also prevent that building's future redevelopment due to these development contracts that are signed when they're built that prevent them from being demolished and upgraded to higher density, perhaps, if that's what the area becomes.
Yeah, and the higher density is the solution here. And I don't mean, specifically for Santa Monica, but just having some higher density offerings everywhere means you can lower the cost of each individual unit, so teachers could then afford to buy or rent.
Right. Well, luckily, California has actually passed a couple new laws that are going to make that a lot easier. There's two statewide bills that were passed just a couple weekends ago. The first was eliminating minimum parking requirements for new construction. So you as the business owner, as a developer, get to choose how many parking spots you're going to build. You're not going to build zero, but you're not going to have to build a city or state required amount of spots per square foot, which will make building a lot cheaper, because in California they tend to dig out basements that are multiple stories deep, and that ends up being like half your development cost. It's crazy. The other was allowing for people to build what are called ADUs, or accessory dwelling units, in their backyards. You can build a little casita. You can maybe rent it out to a teacher for something that they can afford. We're making slow progress here. Yeah.
So, are you saying that now you can build a casita in your yard, or they're out? Because I can't keep up with California. Every time I think they're doing something good, I'm like, oh wait, no, that's actually not good. The casitas are a good thing, and now you're allowed to.
Right, you're now allowed to, and let's be honest, people have been building them regardless of what the government does, because guess what? They don't have time to check on everyone's backyard. You still get to own your own property. You own your own property, you have your own rights.
And the casitas make a lot of sense if you have an unused backyard and you have a teacher who's literally willing to, come in there and rent, and they pay, they're good tenants. Then you literally are making money and helping to solve the housing crisis in your area of California.
Right, it's win-win. There are many market rate win-win situations out there. We just have to be willing to say, okay, what freedom can we give back to people that's actually going to result in a better society and a better community?
I agree 100%. Well, I want to point everybody over to the website. It's the California Review, calrev.org, and you can also visit Kenneth on Twitter at Kenneth Schrupp. You can also find his Twitter. Actually, we tweeted him already before the show started, so thank you so much, Kenneth Schrupp, strategist at Chamberlain PR and editor-in-chief at the California Review, for joining me tonight.
Thank you so much for having me on, Stacy. You have a good night.
You too. 866-957-2874. Back for more.
Breitbart News Daily.
Every morning on